right, good morning everybody. Today is Wednesday, July 27th, 2016, and this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Wednesday, everyone. It is 63 degrees and partly sunny here in upstate New York. Looks like it is going to be a very pleasant summer day. So where did we leave off yesterday? We titled the show Cancer, CRISPRing Humans, Bacteria, and Mutant Zika. And yes, Zika is rearing its ugly head again. We heard about a case in Utah where there seems to have been transmission without any of the traditional modes of transmission that they had thought they knew so much about. They said that it was not contracted through sexual contact or being bitten by a mosquito that was already infected, because they don't exist in Utah in the desert, which I guess it's kind of deserty. I mean, it's all rocky. But they're not sure now, and they're afraid that this mysterious, never-before-seen case of transmission might be causing some potential issues, but whew, don't worry about it. We have $1 billion Zika emergency alert team here in the United States, and we have dedicated all kinds of resources to combating the dreaded Zika here in the United States. One of the things I wanted to touch on, speaking of Zika, we talked about him yesterday. Oxitec has been really spinning up a lot of shilly, paid, commercialized, free marketing for themselves over this whole Zika hype, which I'm going to tell you is an absolute utter bunch of bullshit. All of it is. I've been watching this since the days of Bill and Melinda Gates just dipping their toes into genetically modified mosquitoes, and bloop, lo and behold, here we have this Oxitec that had been already sprinkling their mosquitoes around, all experimental, and oh, look what happened in Brazil, and oh, look at the Cayman Islands, and look at how wonderful, and we wanted to dump them in the Keys, and thank God for the people in the Florida Keys who put their foot down and said, no way, we don't want them. Now, I don't know where that's at right now, but I have a feeling that that's going to happen regardless of whether or not the people in the Keys want these mosquitoes. But we have now, through mega lobbying efforts, I could guarantee you $1 billion for Zika now in the United States. No, I'm sorry, people. We got people starving and dying of cancers and all kinds of shit. People who can't eat, or people who don't have a place to live. And what do we got going on with Zika here? Well, I don't know. The news keeps telling us we have cases, but I haven't seen anything. I mean, seriously, you think we got an epidemic in the United States of Zika to dedicate $1 billion to it? I just don't even see where that is justified. But we had Oxitec CEO testify in a congressional committee hearing to the science of Zika and the DNA of an epidemic, and convince Congress that they had to dedicate $1 billion. Now, there was a story that came out July 8th, 2016, and I had a bunch of stuff queued up here for the last couple weeks. I told you, sorry that I haven't been as regular as normal. I know I'm pretty regular during the winter time, but summertime is really tough for me. I am the summer vacation coordinator, and sometimes it's just a little too tough for me. I can't get my... you got to be able to think straight, and sometimes it's a little hard with all the distractions. So anyway, Oxitec CEO Hayden Perry spoke before the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology on May 25th, 2016, in a hearing called The Science of Zika, the DNA of an Epidemic. And in his testimony, alongside several prominent entomologists and infectious disease specialists, Perry explained why traditional vector controls, and we've talked about insects as disease vectors, while traditional vector controls like insecticides are not effective against the dangerous Aedes aegypti mosquito, and why a new solution is urgently needed. Now, of course, the new solution is going to be their genetically modified mosquitoes that they're waiting for FDA approval on to rubber stamp it and allow them to let them go all over. But this is what he says. Just listen to this shilly shit. I can't stand listening to these people spin up false narratives. We are facing an unprecedented challenge of mosquito-borne diseases today. Vector controlling the mosquito is actually our first line of defense. And it's an area we've sadly neglected over the past decades. And because of this, we see a sharp rise in dengue, chikungunya, and now we have the Zika emergency. And I believe, pretty certain, that the reason they got that $1 billion here in the United States to fight Zika is because Obama declared it a Zika emergency. Now, I just don't even know what to say. I mean, a Zika emergency, like they're all crying for climate change is going to be causing Zika to spread everywhere. Well, maybe it's been hot. And like I said yesterday, my friend down in Southwest Texas, it's been hot. But you're not going to convince me that any traditional mosquitoes, and even the ones from South America that hide under beds and in closets, aren't going to be living in 100-degree plus heat on a daily basis in the desert. I just don't see it happening. When have mosquitoes ever lived in the desert? So, if our temperatures have been cranking so high here in the United States all summer because of global warming, then why are we worrying about mosquitoes? I would think that mosquitoes would be the last things on our mind with that kind of heat. But hey, don't worry about it because we have a Zika emergency. We're spraying pesticides, and now we need to release the hounds, these genetically modified mosquitoes. And good old Oxitec got up in front of Congress to convince them why their product is so important. So anyway, back to this shilly propaganda press release. At Oxitec, we look for a new approach, and that was to use the mosquito against itself. Now, we dug into all the technology that they were using. They were using CRISPR. And that's what was interesting about this in the very beginning. We weren't on this about the Zika. We were on this about the CRISPR. Because they were CRISPRing mosquitoes. And then they were using the gene drive to be able to pump a genetic change through an entire population. And that was where they discovered the population suppression and population elimination. And remember, anything that they can do in insects and animals, the next guinea pigs are going to be humans. And so always be careful what science hands you. I look at everything as a double-edged sword. They can promise you, for as much as it's going to be able to cure, there's probably a good chance that if someone turned the tables, it probably would be able to kill as well. And we found that out about CRISPR. George Church talked about CRISPR being a killing machine long before they discovered how to make it zip DNA strands back up again. Alright, anyway, back to this shilly Oxitec piece. Oxitec has engineered male Egyptian mosquitoes to carry a self-limiting gene that causes their offspring to die. And the way this works is we release the males that cannot bite. And then they go out and mate with the wild females. Now, we found out a few things in doing deep research into Oxitec mosquitoes way back when. Is that some of the females do actually survive, but they had only happened in a lab, and they didn't think it'd be a big deal out in the wild. Yeah, big deal out in the wild where you got 1,000 other different variables that weren't considered in the lab. But no, don't worry about it. We'll just let them go and see what happens. Wink, and how are you ever going to prove it was us? But the other thing was that self-limiting gene was limited by the availability of tetracycline. When they raised these mosquitoes, they had a genetic modification that required them to be fed tetracycline. So when the tetracycline supply was cut off, well, guess what? They didn't live very long. And the problem was that in the original countries where they were releasing these GMO mosquitoes in mass grand trials, like in Brazil, it was discovered that Brazil had lots of tetracycline in the environment, not only from the livestock animals, but from runoff and whatever else. Plus, in the United States here, we just have this big problem from overprescription. Tetracycline actually is one is one antibiotic you don't ever want to take and go into the sun, if I remember correctly. Remember, I was a guinea pig for a lot of different things. I took that for a long time. Causes liver damage. I remember my doctor telling me after she found out some other quack had me on that shit for a year and a half. But anyway, alright, back to the story. Females cannot tell the difference between the wild males and Oxitec males. And the more that will mate with our males, the more offspring will die, and we will bring the population crashing down. Now, wait. Let's think about this. We're doing all these wild experiments on mosquitoes. We got Oxitec, it's a corporation out of the UK. We've got funding by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, going to Congress and presenting their product as our grand solution to fix our killer Zika problem here we have in the United States. So, they passed the bill. This was before the bill passed, but they did pass the bill. And they got $1 billion now for this Zika emergency. Well, you got $1 billion, that buys a lot of research, doesn't it? Listen to this. This is what we just read. I'm going to read this again, because remember, when we research on insects, and then we move on to little mousies, then typically humans are next. Maybe monkeys in between. This is what they said about the mosquitoes. Females can't tell the difference between wild males and Oxitec males. So, regular Biology 1.0 mosquitoes and Biology 2.0 mosquitoes, genetically modified and released into the environment, yes, they can't tell the difference. And the more that mate with our males, so the more 1.0 females that mate with the 2.0 males, the more of those offspring will die. And we will bring the population crashing down. Now, when you realize that Bill and Melinda Gates were responsible for some of the funding to create these mosquitoes, talking about creating a genetic mutation in a genetically modified mosquito, that when they fertilize offspring, those offspring are going to die. And the population elimination, or population suppression, comes crashing down. Now, I have, and maybe we can find it, I hate when I do this because it's hard on my notebook, but I had a clip when I was doing playlists last week. I was sorting some lists on Pigmine, and I ran across a Bill Gates video. Here it is.
Bill Gates, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
You have come out and put your money where your mouth is again. You've written an amazing letter talking about the good news. And let's start with the good news. You say, by almost any measure, the world is better than it has ever been. Wow, we wouldn't think that just to look at what's going on in the world. Tell me in a few sentences why you say that.
Well, I agree that if you just look at news headlines, it's easy to know about the bad things going on because the good things are kind of quiet. For example, poor countries getting richer. When I was born, most of the world was poor, and the rich countries were the exception. Now, most people live in countries that are middle income, and in the next 20 years, if we're generous, if we do the right things, there will be very, very few poor countries left. And yet that's happened sort of day by day, and so it's never really a headline thing. So we have to remind people we are making fantastic progress.
I'm telling you, people are going to find that hard to believe. But you're Bill Gates. You have the algorithms. So
people are going to find that hard to believe, but don't worry about it because we're telling you what to believe, and you're Bill Gates.
If one is to build on success and celebrate success, you have devoted your letter this year to busting what you call 3 major myths about poverty. That those who are poor will never be able to get out of where they are. Give me your first myth and what needs to be busted.
First is that poor countries stay poor. That's not right. That progress there is unbelievably good. Second is that aid is wasted, and there I talk about why I've chosen to spend money on these health programs that really do lift countries up. And finally, my wife Melinda writes about the fact that if you improve health, you don't get population explosion. In fact, by improving health, empowering women, population growth comes down, and so solving problems actually gets a lot easier.
Ding, ding, ding. If you improve health, i.e. with vaccines, and he does say that in that TED conference, then the population falls and solving problems gets easier. Right. Because they have all this mad science gone mad science where they can do birth control, where they can do eugenics, where people die of things and you can never track back what they're dying from, but there have been so many cases now of bad vaccinations. There was that case in Pakistan that they talked about where some radical attacked them. But you know what? The Pakistanis did not want their children vaccinated, and they were forcing it upon them from a United Nations perspective. I mean, where is that ever right? Where is that right that you're forcing people to get some sort of 21st century medication that, and first of all, they don't have informed consent. Second of all, you could be doing anything you want to those people. And you know that they have been. There have been all kinds of stories about them forced sterilizing women in India and other countries without their knowledge. Or maybe with their knowledge, but at gunpoint or at, UN peacekeeper point. It just is not right. And I mean, I don't have a problem with the rest of the world being healthy, but let's make it some sort of medicine woman that's making them healthy and coming up with good recommendations for better food and naturalistic healing versus some sort of DARPA created mad science vaccine in a lab somewhere with funding from Bill and Melinda Gates. All right. Anyway, and here's the other thing. As Bill Gates is investing his money, and oh, what a philanthropist you are, Billy. Here's the thing. Bill realizes as he's purchasing genetic engineering companies, as he's purchasing drug production companies, and there were quite a few purchases over the last year or so, don't think that he isn't looking at this, where he's got his free line item budget, R&D, for poor people in poor countries to test stuff on. Okay, it doesn't cost him anything. He's got his vaccines that he can prove the efficacy by utilizing all of these free R&D people to inject them into. And then he's got the global supply chain to release it and make bazillions of dollars after the fact. It's a win-win for him because on top of it all, they've managed to force sterilize some people that didn't even know it. And maybe even kill some people who didn't even know it. Plausible deniability. How do you know that it was the vaccine? And especially with some of the new mad science. I don't know. I did not get to those stories last night, so I guess I'll have to try and get to them today. There was a whole bunch of stuff on these new little nanobot things. But I mean, when you have all this new crazy technology that no quote-unquote regulatory agency is going to approve in the United States here off the bat, unless, of course, you have someone like Bill Gates pushing it as the next big savior to mankind. Those people in third world nations are probably going to be your best bet to get human trials without having to jump through all the regulatory hoops. Anyway, let's go back now to Oxitec, because I really didn't want to spend this on Bill Gates or Oxitec or Zika or mosquitoes, but I wanted to finish up from yesterday, and I wanted to point out that Oxitec has been in Congress, they have been lobbying, and now they are going around to communities across America and trying to convince their emergency managers that their product, their genetically modified mosquito, is environmentally friendly, unlike pesticides, and it is our last chance at trying to stop the Zika emergency, which is such a crock of shit. I mean, guys, maybe down south, I would say that I probably would not want to live in Louisiana right now, and they did have one of the representatives from Louisiana here that we're going to talk about in a second. Or maybe in Florida. I'm sure it's pretty bad, but the weather has been so hot. Haven't you seen those little natural gas mosquito suckers? They're like little vacuum cleaners, and it burns a little bit of natural gas, and it makes the mosquito think that it's a human. I think it puts out CO2 because that's what they look for. And they make it you think that it's a human, and the mosquitoes go over there, and then they get sucked into this bag. I mean, why wouldn't you do something like that en masse? Personally, I would have to say that it would be way friendlier to the environment than spraying pesticides everywhere. Of course, they're going to say, but you're putting out CO2, that's a climate change gas. But hey, you know what? It's way better than releasing the genie out of the bottle that we don't even know what's going to happen 30 generations down the line. This is insanity. We've talked about this many times before, but letting genies out of the bottle, genetically modified whatevers, and it doesn't matter what the life form is, whether it be bacterial, animal, insect, or human, shouldn't be happening in an open system. We do not know what the long-term effects are going to be. Where's our supercomputer at DARPA running the simulations 100,000 years into the future with these variables changed to see what the potential future is going to be? Because I don't think it's going to be in our best interest. Anyway, back down to this congressional hearing. So we got Representative Abrams from Louisiana actually stepped right up and commented on this, so I'm going to say that he probably is in Oxitec's pocket. Females can't tell the difference, right? We already found that out, between wild males and Oxitec males. So, hey, look out. We might not someday be able to tell the difference between wild male humans and genetically modified 2.0 human males when you're going to choose somebody to procreate with. You know, and anybody who is a 2.0 biology, you're going to end up with some mutant child, or maybe the child won't even make it past gestation. And, you know, that's really sad, because I don't think it would be too hard for them to do that. They could put a limiting gene, just like they're doing in that mosquito, and they could put it into a vaccine. And think about what vaccine they're giving out like crazy right now. That who is involved? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh, wait, the HPV vaccine. Ha! The whole next generation of children starting at 10 or 11 years old, we're injecting with this shit that I've already read case studies about it putting an 11-year-old into menopause. Yes, menopause at 11. Don't worry about that. We're not trying to sterilize your children or give them any type of genetic defect so they can't reproduce in the future. No, and hey, by the way, you know that cervical cancer vaccine? Well, hey, give it to boys as well, because it'll prevent boys from getting anal cancer. Wink. You know, and this is just scary, scary stuff. And the more and more I read about some of these newfangled vaccinations and different therapies that they're doing, anybody who would put their kid up as a sacrificial lamb because the commercial told them so, because it was good for them, has a screw loose. Don't think that this is being done in your best interest. Since when has the government ever put their arms out and said, we love you, we care about you, we want to make you safe and healthy, come right, step right up, we got a free vaccine for you. And actually, the Gardasil isn't free, but hey, I bet it'll be subsidized if you couldn't afford it. It's just sad. It's very sad. And everybody's just eating it up. I have friends that took their daughters in their 1.0 vaccine. It was even before the Gardasil 9 came out, and they told you that the original Gardasil didn't prevent any of those horrible cancers. They actually discovered it made you more vulnerable to all those horrible cancers, and so the way to fix it was to get the new Gardasil vaccine, which is the Gardasil 9. And I did a whole series of shows on that. It was very disturbing. If you don't believe me, search before the first cup of Gardasil, you'll see them. There was at least 2 where that was all documented. Alright, so anyway, Representative Ralph Abrams from Louisiana steps up and, of course, says it is a phenomenal feat that Oxitec solution has demonstrated that they've reduced the Aedes aegypti population by 90% in about 6 months in a localized area. And if that's the case, I think that's about the number that they're talking about needing to reduce the global population as well to have it be sustainable. We've got to quit putting Band-Aids on this, says Abrams. We've got to get to the root cause of this, and the root cause is that mosquito. yellow fever, dengue, malaria, they are all vector-borne, and we have to kill the source. What right does Abrams have to be deciding that we can wipe out an entire species? I just saw something the other day about New Zealand is getting ready to wipe out rats. I wanted to dig into that story because, again, I know New Zealand is an island, and typically rats on an island came over on ships, so they aren't really indigenous species. They're invasive. But here's the problem. When we start playing God, and we're deciding what lives and what dies, and we got some Yahoo, well, I don't know if he's a senator, a congressman, whatever he is, some Yahoo dude that's deciding that it's a phenomenal feat to wipe out 90% of a species. And, granted, I brought this up before, mosquitoes are pretty annoying. Yes, they can carry diseases. But on the other hand, there are other organisms in the food chain that depend upon the mosquitoes as a food source. So when you wipe out 90% of the mosquitoes, well, guess what? 90% of the bats are probably going to starve. Those poor little baddies that eat 10 times their weight in insects that really help with insect control on the planet, and all of a sudden they don't have a food source. I mean, why would you not go to some of these locations where we have an overabundance of diseased mosquitoes and start encouraging them to build bat houses and to put bat houses in the woods? And especially since we had that white nose disease, at least in the northeastern U.S., and we lost a large number of our bats. Why wouldn't we be practicing conservation, trying to bring the bats back, and in turn having natural mosquito control? I mean, doesn't that seem like a more ecologically friendly way to control mosquitoes versus spraying pesticides? And then screw it, doesn't work anymore. Let's let out these monster Frankenstein mosquitoes into the environment and hope it all works out well for everybody. It's just absolutely beyond off the rails lunacy. But see, someone like me, I'm a tinfoil hat wearing lunatic, aren't I? You know why? Because I try to put common sense on my head, and I don't listen to the bullshit that somebody who thinks they're smarter than me tries to tell me, and unfortunately, that's kind of been a flaw of mine since I was a child. And especially if you try to act like you are way smarter than me and know way much more and try to force me to take your idea without questioning it. Well, you know what? I think I might genetically have that oppositional defiant disorder, because it just doesn't work for me. My dad and I figured that out when I was like 18, and I said, I'm out of here, because I just couldn't take it anymore. Don't go trying to force your ideas down my throat and not allow me to question, because it just doesn't work. But, my problem is that I think too much, and I ask too many questions. When I was in school growing up, the entire class, like every 5 minutes I'd raise my hand to ask another question. The entire class would literally groan, because I was the one who asked so many questions. But you know what? It was as my brain was trying to work through, step by step, trying to come to my own conclusions. And that's a problem. They're breeding that right out of us, and people don't do that anymore. They love to be force-fed, and it's because the brain has gotten flabby and lazy from being fed information all the time, whether it be on the television, the computer, or your mobile device. They want you to be fed information, and eventually it's going to be the little earbud or the little implant, and then you won't even have to work at it anymore. You'll just get your daily news update into your head, and you won't have to think. It'll be easy. We'll give you funny, cute little games that you can run around and try and catch Pac-Man. Or Pokemon, one or the other. Alright, anyway. So Abrams thinks this is such a great idea. He says we have to kill the source. So let's kill all mosquitoes, because you know what? We hate them. We hate them. They bite. They spread disease. So they don't deserve to live. We need to just wipe them off the face of the planet. Don't worry about the fact that we're already in the 6th grade extinction scientists day on the planet. We have thousands of species that are dying every year on this planet, but it's no big deal. Nah, it won't affect you. You know why? Because all those species that are dying across the planet and dying in the ocean and dying in the air don't have any effect on the food in the grocery store. No. It's not going to affect you. It doesn't matter if the flora and fauna of this planet all die. No, we just manufacture everything. And you know what? In the future, that might be true. In the future, with replicators and 3D printing and being able to crack... I'm trying to remember what they called it. We did it a couple weeks ago. We talked about the 3D printing of just about everything. They can actually synthesize the building blocks of life chemically from scratch. They can make it from other things, and then they can turn it into things that we know and love. So it's pretty frightening, but right now, don't worry about it. We're going to just start wiping out species that we deem unnecessary. And again, who is deeming that mosquitoes are unnecessary? I could guarantee you that there are lots of species that eat mosquitoes. But I guess the federal government has. And I guess Oxitec, with all their lobbyists, patted them on a few butts and probably took them to go see a show or two and toss back a couple cocktails, and it's all done. The federal government is, unfortunately, often reactive, in my opinion, and this is that Representative Abrams out of Louisiana, who is a physician who has treated vector-spread diseases, and he was frustrated that the approval by the FDA was taking so long for Oxitec to be able to release their mosquitoes. Remember, the keys got blocked, and now they're still waiting on that FDA approval because the people are screaming about it. But this Abrams says it's like sending the Hindenburg to rescue the Titanic. We need to be better than that, and we should be better than that at this stage of the game. We have wonderful scientists here that tell us that we need to act now, and we should have acted a year ago. I'm going to say, if I didn't know any better, I would say Abrams has some good friends inside of Oxitec. I'm sure that they're paying him for them to do testing in Louisiana, and who knows if even they got regulatory approval or just kind of out the back door and lets them go. Again, this stuff, we find out about stuff on the front end, but I will guarantee you, just knowing how corrupt this nation is, not just this nation, everywhere, human nature is corrupt. Human nature, at least in the majority, I would have to say today, is completely out of window. Any of those morals that we used to have where people cared about their neighbor and had a sense of duty and morality and told the truth and tried to be upstanding, didn't steal, connive, lie, use. I don't think those people really exist much anymore. There's some of us out there, but there aren't a lot of us out there. I hate to say it. And every step of the way, I always got to be on guard. I'm a sucker for getting sucked in by people's sob stories and then finding out that sob story was just a dangling carrot to get people like me to get sucked into the hole to then get taken advantage of. And it happens time and time again to me. I'm trying to get better at that. But the sad fact of the matter is, that is a narcissist, one of those people that requires the ability to manipulate and control to be able to feel fulfilled. And we've created an entire generation or two or three of narcissists. We talked about all that. I'm not going to get into that today, but that whole dopamine addiction and being sucked into the machine is all part of it. High fructose corn syrup, even sex, money, gambling, it's all part of the same thing. It's the dopamine addiction. And that's all tied right back to those areas of the brain that are responsible for that psychopathy disorder. And we have an entire world full of psychopaths now, and this isn't where we want to be. It really isn't. But anyway, so Louisiana's representative has pretty much sold them to Oxitec. Louisiana is like a big chemical state anyway. They had a lot of chemical production, so I wouldn't doubt it. I never really thought of Louisiana and their government as being very much on the up and up either, and it doesn't look like they are in the future. So put on a seatbelt, because Oxitec is in Congress, and we have $1 billion to fight Zika here in the United States, and it looks like they've been going around now to all the different communities, convincing them that the only environmentally friendly way to take care of mosquitoes is to do genetically modified mosquitoes into the environment. That's all there is to it. So put on a seatbelt, because we already found out that you can splice and dice anything into a mosquito and make it a flying syringe so it could give vaccines or whatever the hell they want. They could be their little drone army as they release them. Just saying, guys, this stuff is happening right in front of our eyes. We're distracted about so many other things, and who cares about mosquitoes, really, right? Well, right, who cares about mosquitoes? But isn't it interesting that our federal government has given $1 billion, $1 billion to this Zika pandemic emergency that doesn't exist? Why? Why? And the fact that Bill and Melinda Gates was involved in the back end. Why? Well, because of course we're going to cure all disease. Excuse me. All right, so we looked yesterday at a number of other things, cancer and CRISPRing humans, CRISPRing T cells in the race to cure cancer. We have the Penn U, who is hoping to get their approval by December to treat 3 different cancers by CRISPRing T cells. But we now have China, who just jumped ahead in line, and China's thinking that by next month, August, they are going to CRISPR humans to try and cure small cell lung cancer. We also found out that there is a new technique using E. coli, where they can physically program E. coli bacteria. So when it's released into the body, it can go in and produce pharmaceuticals. They're working on that at MIT and the University of San Diego. Well, I found a story that's kind of a follow-up to that, and this is out of the University of Buffalo, my alma mater. E. coli, the ideal transport vehicle for next-generation vaccines. Yes, I said it. So we did all kinds of research into edible vaccines and some of the craziness that they've been experimenting with over the last 25 years or so. Well, now get ready for it. Good old E. coli. It's all over the place. Can now be modified to provide medications, and potentially without you even knowing. Researchers have developed an E. coli-based transport capsule designed to help the next generation vaccines do a more effective and efficient job than today's immunizations. The research highlights the capsule's success in fighting pneumococcal disease, an infection that can result in pneumonia, sepsis, ear infections, and meningitis. The core of the capsule is a harmless E. coli. And around the bacteria, researchers wrapped a synthetic polymer called a polybeta-amino ester, and it looks a lot like a little chain-link fence. The positively charged polymer combined with negatively charged bacterial cell walls creates sort of a hybrid capsule. And researchers are now experimenting with harmless strains of E. coli. Yes, the majority of E. coli are safe and important to healthy human digestion. Now remember, Symbiotics, synthetic gut bacteria company that they spun out of MIT that had funding from who? Oh, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation again. Yes, this is going to be part of that modification of gut bacteria to treat diseases and now apparently to give vaccines. Anyway, researchers at UB have developed an E. coli-based transport designed to help the next generation vaccines do a more efficient job than today's immunizations, and the research described in the study published on July 1st in the Journal of Science Advances highlights the capsule's success in fighting pneumococcal disease, an infection that, and they already said that, they repeated that twice, pneumonia, sepsis, ear infection, and meningitis. It is a bit of counterintuitive given what you hear about E. coli, but there are many strains of bacteria, most of which are perfectly normal in the body, and they have a great potential to fight disease, says Blaine Pfeiffer, Ph.D., Associate Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering at the University of Buffalo School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Pfeiffer is the study's co-leading author, along with his former student, Charles H. Jones, Ph.D., who is leading efforts to commercialize the biotechnology. And here we go. Ding, ding. We've rolled out a new startup. I'd like to know who UB got their funding from. Anyway, Charles H. Jones, Ph.D., who's leading the efforts to commercialize the biotechnology, is CEO and founder of Buffalo, New York-based startup Abcambi Biosciences, and the core of the transport capsule the team developed is a harmless E. coli. Around the bacteria, researchers wrapped a synthetic polymer called polybeta-amino ester that resembles a chain link fence. And to test the capsule, the researchers then inserted a protein-based vaccine, also being commercialized by Abcambi, designed to fight pneumococcal disease. So this is going to be the new pneumonia vaccine. You wait and see. For elderly, right? They pimp that to elderly people all the time. And the results, when of course tested in mice, was impressive. In the capsule's hybrid design provided both passive and active targeting of specific immune cells called antigen-presenting cells that trigger an immune response. Natural and multi-component adjuvant properties, which enhance the body's immune response. Dual intercellular delivery mechanisms to direct a particular immune response. Simultaneous production and delivery of the components required for the vaccine, and strong vaccination protection against pneumococcal disease. It is also relatively inexpensive to create, and you know Bill and Melinda love that one. And it is flexible in terms for use. For example, the capsule could be used as a delivery device for therapies that targeted what? Oh, cancer, and we read about that yesterday. As well as viral-based infection diseases and other illnesses. Dun, dun, dun. Put on a seatbelt, because I'm going to tell you what, edible vaccines are still coming, and anything that you read in this country, they're like, oh no, don't worry about it. We're not putting edible vaccines into food anymore because, there was too much of a chance that they get mixed up with regular food. We're only going to do it in plant-based products like tobacco and lettuce. And that was at Penn U as well. The tobacco was down in Kentucky and Texas A&M. But here's a problem. Even though they stopped here, it appears we found out that a lot of the research has been moved over to India. Oh, yes, Bill and Melinda Gates Bill Gates for Microsoft had all of his programmer villages and things over there. And they've been tied into India for a long time, and India is where a lot of our mad science research has gone. All right, so talking more about mutant viruses. To fight a virus, get a virus. The military bets on mutant pathogens. Yeah, well, Army is interested in funding research for bioterrorism defense. Oh, yes, they are. In a treatment that could evolve along with lethal infections. And we talked about that evolving, shape-shifting synthetic immune system that they are working on for humans. There are a couple different projects that are out there. They had one that was being financed by DARPA. They had a couple of universities that were spinning them out, some of that original DARPA research. Then we had IBM as well, who's working on their own version. It says a pair of brothers working in laboratories on opposite coasts of the U.S. are brewing a new approach to fight viruses, one that's drawn interest from the military for protection against the threats of infections such as what? Oh, Zika! And, of course, Ebola. Ebola that already turned mutant. And even after they've cured it, they've found that it's reproduced millions of times, just like that new Zika that they found in the Utah guy. And it was hiding in different body parts. This new experimental treatment, pursued by Ariel Weinberger at Harvard University and Lear Weinberger, who's a virologist at the University of California, San Francisco, deployed a tweaked, safe version of a virus to overwhelm the form that invades and kills cells. And while it was very early, and we read about this is a SIP, I think they were called, or TIP, where they develop something that completely overwhelms the immune system, almost like a cancer. And it makes so many copies of itself that it like starves out the infection. But to me, that doesn't sound like a good idea. I mean, that's overwhelming your immune system with unknowns. It says this approach has only been tested in test tubes and in animals, but the U.S. government is ready to invest in developing the idea and seeing whether similar mutants can protect against other diseases. Each new outbreak that shakes the globe, whether it's Zika spreading across the Americas or the new world strain of a deadly flu, and put on a seatbelt, people, because you know they're coming. I mean, the next big beta test for whatever their next big, quote-unquote, scientific discovery will be coming soon. And it really makes you wonder whether or not, as they're developing all this mad science, they aren't putting a dose or two into the Strategic National Stockpile as part of that Project BioShields. Remember, we looked into that. So if we ever declare an emergency, we can release all of those untested drugs in the case of an emergency to be utilized on the general public. Each new outbreak that shakes the globe, whether it's Zika spreading across the Americas, or a worldwide strain of a deadly flu, is a reminder of the difficulty of fighting emerging viruses, many of which evolve quickly to frustrate and evade drugs. And in a connected world where diseases spread via air travel, new ways to fight them are vital, says Ariel Weinberger, a member of who? What's he a member of? Oh, wait. Hold it. Harvard's Weiss Institute, yes, for biologically inspired engineering. This is the dude that I really want to be working on some sort of quote-unquote vaccine for me. The home of the robo-bees, guys. The home of origami at a minuscule nanotech level. To be able to mass produce these little mini robots, I don't think I want anyone, even any way, shape, or form affiliated with the Weiss Institute, working on anything that's going into my body. Thank you very much. Disease transmits, he says, and current therapeutics don't. Diseases evolve, and current therapeutics don't. And diseases persist for a lifetime, and current therapeutics obviously need to be constantly administered. So hey, let's fix that, you defective humans. The brothers are studying bits of genetic material called therapeutic interfering particles, or TIPS. So this was the DARPA-sponsored research that, while known for decades, have just recently shown potential to snuff disease outbreaks. And while the potential for side effects must be understood, the effectiveness in humans remains unstudied. Don't worry about it, it will be. And the Weinbergers have received funding from who? Well, I was right. The U.S. Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, more affectionately known as DARPA, for exploratory studies in TIPS. And in April, DARPA issued a call for even more proposals. The agency is interested in looking at a variety of TIPS, each primed to fight a different disease. viruses grow by squirting their genes into a cell. And we talked about that. Like, they are geniuses at finding vulnerabilities in cells. And once they get inside, they start reproducing like crazy. And when they do that, it hijacks the protein-making machinery inside the cell to produce the ingredients of viral copies. So they do. They literally hijack the cell, divert it from its own natural functions, and sometimes it bursts apart by the virus's mass exit. The host cell usually dies. So, I don't know. They go on and on and on. The long road, we're looking at a situation where it's getting easier and easier for nefarious people or nefarious communities or countries to engineer their own viruses, says Jim Gimlet, a program director at DARPA. Well, yeah, so, holy shit. Too bad they sent out 60,000 plus copies of CRISPR to anyone and everyone who asked for it all around the globe. To democratize genetic modification. Good thing we did that. So now we have a fear that nefarious people, communities, or countries are going to engineer their own viruses and let them go. Well, problem, reaction, solution. So now we got to come up with some sort of shape-shifting immune system and drug to keep you safe, people. So anyway, this Jim Gimlet says the more tools we have to respond rapidly to new viral strains that have never been seen before. Remember, never before seen. That's why we've had so many of these, because they laid out now the need. They got all their funding. They got $1 billion for Zika. The Zika epidemic that doesn't exist. So the more tools we have to respond rapidly to new viral strains that we've never seen before is definitely now a national security concern. Ding, 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 ding. The biowarfare program has come out of the closet, and it's back out in the limelight, and it's all in defensive postures and vaccines, just like Nixon said it should be. The road to that goal is long, and there's many questions along the way, and to fight some viruses, tips would likely have to integrate themselves into human DNA, ding, to fight some viruses. The tips, which are the DARPA financed research of the shape-shifting, evolving protection against never-before-seen viral strains, and it may just have to integrate itself into human DNA, but don't worry about it. It won't make you bump into walls or be sterile or go grow claws or fangs or wings. No, don't. That's just that crazy chick called Jules talking about that stuff. It won't do that. Anyway, to fight some viruses, tips would likely have to integrate into human DNA, a process that has been linked to cancer and other forms of gene therapy. Whoa. One concern is whether installing tips in a cell's DNA would lead to side effects. Oh, you think that's a concern? Don't worry about it. Says Robert Gallo, head of the Institute of Human Virology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and also the co-discoverer of HIV. Oh, so he's no small potatoes. I'm going to tell you, though, Mr. Robert Gallo, I highly recommend being in the lizard's den in Maryland, in the pit of lots of evil. I'd be careful standing up and talking out against the machine, because I've already seen a few strange cases in Maryland where they've had some whistleblower walking around aimlessly on surveillance camera with one shoe, and then he was mysteriously found dead in a dumpster a couple days later. Things like that happen in Maryland. Anyway, back to this. Gallo says the manipulations are doable. The questions are if it'll be practical, he said in a telephone interview, and it is too early to throw on cold or hot water. TIPS DNA integration has been shown to be safe in many experiments, and there are many viral diseases that TIPS could fight without entering the cellular DNA, says Ariel Weinberger. Animal and human testing are still needed to fully answer these questions, but Gallo said it has not worked with the Weinbergers. The TIPS strategy has shown some positive results in animal tests against flu, a virus that is constantly evolving and kills thousands, I say, of people annually around the globe. Mice that were given a form of TIPS resisted extreme doses of flu virus. And when tested in ferrets, which is a closer model for human flu, TIPS reduced symptoms more than Roche's Tamiflu. Well, good. So let's get our DNA altered instead of taking Tamiflu. What the fuck? Can you believe this shit? But this is all normal. And it's in the news, and this is written in Bloomberg, so it's going to be all good. Don't worry. We've tested it in mice up to the point where the flu would normally kill them. And guess what? The mice didn't even get sick. We're going to give you superpowers, Johnny. As the flu reminds us every year, the ongoing decimation wrought by age shows shape-shifting viruses are a persistent puzzle. And the question whether human ingenuity can outpace our ever-evolving fighting viral foes is the question. All right, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to prions or the new life form found in saliva. I guess we're going to have to look at that. Or the Texas Immortal Village, where they're going to be freezing people forever until the time when they can be revived and brought back to life. But I had one story I wanted to share with you, and I guess the rest of this will be for tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff on robots, too. Here we go. Yes, anyone who thought that the globalists had your best interest at heart, remember, we are overpopulated, and global climate change is going to reduce not only our food but our water and make things scarce. But we need a good protein source because cows produce too much methane. We shouldn't be eating meat anymore. We got to be healthy humans for the good of the machine. Well, here we go. Scientists think cockroach milk could be the new superfood of the future. Dun, dun, dun. And that's where we're going to pick it up tomorrow. All right, guys, make sure you stick around because it is Wednesday. Miss Lonnie Clark is live up next and all kinds of great new radio on tonight. We got the boys from Continual Condition. We got Liam Sheff, and we have Anti-Media Radio with Nick and DB. All right, guys, have an awesome Wednesday, and I will catch up with you tomorrow. Everybody take care.
JJ